All right, so you ready for this? We're diving deep today.
Always ready. What have you got for me?
Oh, you know it's going to be good.
I have a feeling.
We're talking presidential inaugurations today.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, and to make it even more interesting, we're going to throw in a little twist.
Oh, I like twists. All right, lay it on me.
Okay, so picture this. It's Inauguration Day, but we've got two presidents taking the oath.
Two presidents? How does that work?
So we've got President Vance for his first term, and then right after, President Trump again for his second.
A double inauguration? I don't think I've ever heard of that happening.
Me neither. It's a pretty wild scenario.
Right,
but
definitely adds a whole other level of complexity to an already complicated event.
for sure. And just to spice things up even more, we're going to throw in some crazy weather.
Oh no, what kind of weather are we talking?
Heavy snow. A blizzard, actually.
A blizzard on Inauguration Day. Talk about a challenge for the Secret Service.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So, because of the weather, everything's been moved indoors to the U.S. Capitol Rotunda.
Ah. Oh, wow, the Rotunda. Yeah, that's a pretty impressive space.
It's massive, actually. I was reading that it's so big, you could fit the entire Statue of Liberty inside.
Seriously?
Wow.
Wow. That's hard to even imagine.
Right. But even with all that space, can you imagine the security measures they'd have to put in place?
I can only imagine 24,000 law enforcement officers, maybe. Miles of fencing.
24,000 officers. Wow, that's a small army right there.
It's a national special security event. You can bet they're not taking any chances.
Okay, so let's talk about the Capitol building itself for a minute. I was reading that the central part was finished around 1800.
Right, and then of course there was the fire in 1814 during the War of 1812.
Oh yeah, the burning of Washington. Wasn't that a devastating event?
It was a huge setback, but they rebuilt it pretty quickly, actually, within 5 years.
5 years. That's incredible. They really didn't waste any time.
Yeah, well, Capitol building is a pretty important symbol. You know, they had to get it back up and running.
And of course, over the years, they've added to it and expanded it.
Yeah. Right. The iconic dome was finished in 1866, and then the East Front portico in 1958.
Yeah, it's a pretty impressive building steeped in history.
But even with all the grandeur and the history, security is woven into every part of it.
Oh, absolutely. Especially for an event like this.
Right. Every expansion and renovation takes into account the security needs and how they might change.
So picture this. You're standing in the rotunda. It's Inauguration Day.
Yeah.
There's this buzz of excitement in the air.
I can hear the crowds now, the anticipation.
And right there in the center is this huge 8-sided platform, all decked out in bulletproof glass.
That's where the presidents will deliver their addresses, right?
Exactly. It's like the focal point of the entire event.
And I bet there are snipers strategically positioned all around the building.
Oh, you better believe it. High above around the dome, keeping a watchful eye on everything.
It's a stark reminder of the very real threats presidents face today.
It's not something you want to dwell on,
Yeah.
but it's a necessary reality.
Absolutely. And the security measures go far beyond just snipers. It's a whole orchestrated event.
Right. I was reading about how the seating is arranged. It's like a carefully choreographed representation of the government.
Yeah, you've got the main platform for the presidents and their families, the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
And then there's the inner platform for the senators, a whole section for the House of Representatives.
An outer platform for governors and diplomats. It's like a visual representation of American democracy.
And of course, there are designated areas for invited guests with tickets and all that.
Right. Tickets distributed by state legislators, so it's a pretty big deal.
But it's not just for the VIPs. There are also huge viewing areas for the general public.
Exactly. It's a celebration for all Americans. Even if you can't get a ticket, you can still be a part of it.
Plus, you mentioned you can get a pretty amazing view from around the Washington Monument area, right?
Yeah. Definitely. If you're willing to brave the cold and the crowds, it's worth it.
So after the speeches and all the pomp and circumstance, it's time for the presidential parade down Pennsylvania Avenue.
The parade is a pretty iconic part of the inauguration. It's a symbolic journey from the Capitol to the White House.
A very symbolic journey. And speaking of journeys, that's where things get really interesting.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What are you talking about?
The presidential motorcade, of course.
Ah, yes. The motorcade, a moving fortress.
It's a sight to behold, 40 to 50 vehicles, a massive display of security and power.
It's mind-boggling when you think about the logistics of it. Every detail is meticulously planned.
Okay, so let's break it down a bit for our listeners.
Yeah.
I was reading that the motorcade is essentially divided into stages.
Right, the first stage starts with the lead police vehicle, followed by a Secret Service SUV.
And then there are those motorcycle sweepers clearing the path. What are those guys actually doing?
They're the eyes and ears of the motorcade. Their job is to spot anything out of the ordinary.
Like suspicious activity or potential threats?
Exactly. They're constantly scanning the route, investigating anything that seems off.
So they're the first line of defense, essentially.
You could say that they're paving the way for the most important vehicles in the motorcade.
And then comes stage 2, right? This is where the real action.
Oh, yeah, this is where we see the heavy hitter.
Another police vehicle.
Yeah.
A second Secret Service pilot car. And wait for it. The Beast.
The Beast, not one, but two of them.
2 identical beasts. Why 2?
It's a tactic to create confusion, make it harder for potential attackers to target the right vehicle.
Oh, that's clever. So they don't know which one the president is actually in.
Exactly. It adds another layer of protection.
Okay, I gotta geek out for a second about the Beast, because this is not your average car.
Oh, no. It's a beast in every sense of the word.
We're talking 8-inch thick armor plating, 5-inch bulletproof glass.
Built on a GMC truck frame, it weighs something like 20,000 pounds.
20,000 pounds. That's insane. And the features are just mind-blowing.
It's like a tank disguised as a luxury car.
Seriously, it has an onboard supply of blood that matches the president's blood type.
Just in case of an emergency, and get this, the entire cabin is hermetically sealed.
Hermetically sealed. What for?
To protect against chemical and biological attacks.
Wow, they really think of everything.
They're responsible for the safety of the most powerful person in the world.
So, run flat tires, night vision. Those are just the basics, right?
Oh, yeah. And then there are the defensive mechanisms, smoke screens, oil, slick dispensers, you name it.
It's like James Bond's car on steroids.
It's a rolling fortress designed to withstand just about anything.
To give you an idea of the size, it's about 18 feet long, basically 2 standard cars combined.
It's a behemoth, and it makes a statement wherever it goes.
But here's the thing, even with all this incredible security, technology is changing, and the threats are evolving.
That's a really important point. We live in an age where even everyday tech can be weaponized.
And one of the biggest challenges these days, you mentioned this in your notes, comes from drones.
Drones, that's right. Those little things you can get at Walmart.
Yeah, I mean, they seem pretty harmless when you see them flying around in the park.
Don't be fooled by their size. They can be easily modified to carry explosives.
Really? So a small drone could be used in a targeted attack on the president?
It's a terrifying thought, but it's a very real possibility.
So how does the Beast handle a drone attack? Does it have like an anti-drone laser or something?
Not quite a laser, but it does have some pretty impressive countermeasures.
Oh, like what?
Remember those multiple antenna systems you saw in the pictures of the Beast?
Yeah, I thought those were just for communication.
They're part of its electronic warfare systems, specifically designed to jam radio signals.
So it can basically cut off the drone's connection to its pilot.
Exactly. By disrupting the radio signals, they can prevent the drone from detonating its payload.
Okay, that's pretty reassuring. But what about those more advanced drones you mentioned earlier?
The ones that use fiber optics for communication.
Right. Those seem like they'd be harder to disrupt.
They are, because they're not as reliant on radio signals.
So how do they defend against those?
It's a constant challenge, and one that security agencies are grappling with.
It's like a technological arms race, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. As technology advances, so do the threats, and the methods of protection have to adapt.
It's a lot to think about.
It is, and we've only just scratched the surface.
I know, right? This is just the beginning of our deep dive into presidential security.
Buckle up, because it's going to be a wild ride.
So we were talking about drones last time.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly technology changes.
I know, like you said, you can pick up a drone at Walmart these days.
And modify them pretty easily, too.
To carry explosives?
Yeah, it's scary to think about, but that's the reality we live in now.
But the Beast has some pretty good defenses against that, right?
Oh, yeah. Definitely like those electronic warfare systems we talked about.
The ones that can jam the radio signal.
Exactly. That can stop a lot of those smaller drones.
But what about the ones with fiber optics you mentioned?
Those are tougher, for sure.
Because they don't rely on radio waves as much.
Right. And the technology is always improving, so it's a constant challenge to keep up.
So, hypothetically speaking, let's say one of those fiber optic drones loaded with a warhead gets through.
Gets through all the other defenses.
And makes a beeline for the Beast.
Okay, so it's got to get past a lot first.
Like the armor plating?
8 inches thick, remember?
And those reinforced floor plates.
Right, designed to protect against bombs underneath.
Oh, and the smoke dispensers could come in handy too.
Yeah, if the drone's using a laser-guided system.
So that would buy them some time at least.
It would create confusion and disrupt the targeting.
Okay, but let's say this drone is super sophisticated.
And manages to get past all that?
And detonates its warhead right next to the Beast.
Now we're talking about a serious threat.
So what happens then?
Well, this isn't your average explosion.
What do you mean?
It's a shaped charge.
A sheep charge? What's that?
It's a type of explosive that focuses its energy.
Like a laser beam.
Kind of. It creates a jet of molten metal and heat.
Molten metal?
Yeah, it can slice through steel like butter.
Wow. So even the beast's armor might not be enough.
It depends on the size of the warhead and the angle of the attack.
So there's a chance it could penetrate the beast's defenses.
It's a possibility, and that's why the Secret Service is constantly assessing threats and updating their strategies.
They have to be one step ahead.
Absolutely. They're always thinking about what-if scenarios.
Like that motorcade ambush scenario we talked about.
Oh, yeah, the one with the assassins and the sniper.
That one gave me chills just thinking about it.
It's a worst-case scenario, but they have to be prepared for anything.
So let's say it happens. The assassins ram the escort vehicles trying to box in the beast.
And then the sniper takes aim from a distance.
With a Barrett .50 caliber rifle.
A very powerful weapon.
I was reading that those bullets can penetrate multiple layers of steel.
Even at a distance of a mile or more.
So even with the beast's reinforced windows.
There's a chance that bullet could get through.
That's terrifying. So what happens if the beast is hit?
Well, the Secret Service agents are highly trained.
They're not just bodyguards, are they?
No, they're tactical experts trained to react instantly.
So they would immediately assess the situation.
And take action to protect the president.
Get the beast out of the line of fire.
Exactly. And engage the attackers if necessary.
It must be intense inside the beast during something like that.
You can bet it is as soon as a threat is detected, the Roadrunner system would be activated.
Oh yeah, that mobile communication system?
It's their lifeline. It allows them to communicate securely with other units.
So they can call for backup or coordinate a counterattack?
Exactly. They're never truly alone, even in the middle of an ambush.
That's reassuring because it sounds like a pretty helpless situation otherwise.
It would be, but they have layers of protection, and communication is key.
And of course, there's always the option of a Marine One extraction.
Right. In a worst-case scenario, Marine One would be called in to evacuate the president.
I can just picture it, those Blackhawks circling overhead providing cover.
It would be a dramatic sight, but it's a last resort.
Because it means the ground evacuation is too dangerous.
Exactly. Using Marine One is not a decision they take lightly.
But while we're on the subject of helicopters, why not just use Blackhawks all the time?
They're great for a lot of things, but Marine One is specifically designed for presidential transport.
Oh, right. It has all those extra security features.
Like secure communication channels and electronic countermeasures.
Yeah, those countermeasures sounded pretty sci-fi to me.
They're pretty amazing. They can detect incoming missiles.
And jam their infrared seekers.
Exactly. So the missile veers off course and misses its target.
It's like something out of a movie.
But it's real technology, and it's constantly being updated and improved.
So the president is pretty well protected, even in the air.
As well as they can be. It's a constant challenge to stay ahead of the threats.
Especially with technology evolving so quickly.
That's the key, staying ahead of the curve and anticipating what's next.
Like those AI-controlled drones you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, those are a real concern for the future.
Drones that can think for themselves and make decisions.
It's a scary thought, but it's something we need to be prepared for.
And what about cyber attacks?
Those are a huge threat, too.
Yes.
Think about disrupting communication systems, hacking into vehicles.
Spreading disinformation. It seems like the digital world creates a whole new set of challenges.
It does, and it's something the Secret Service is very aware of.
So it's not just about physical security anymore.
It's about cybersecurity, too.
Yeah.
Protecting the president from digital threats.
It's like a whole other battlefield.
It is, and it's one that's constantly evolving.
So the future of presidential security is going to be even more complex than it is today.
Definitely, the threats are always changing, and the methods of protection have to adapt.
It's a lot to keep up with.
It is, but that's the nature of security. You can never let your guard down.
So much to unpack with presidential security.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
From the beast to drones, it's been pretty wild.
And we haven't even talked about the historical side of things.
Oh, yeah. That's what I was really curious about.
You wanted to know how all these security measures evolved over time.
Exactly. Like it wasn't always this elaborate, right?
Not at all. I mean, think about 100 years ago, things were very different.
Yeah, presidents used to walk around without a whole army of agents surrounding them.
It's hard to imagine now, isn't it?
It is. So what were some of the key moments that shaped how we protect the president today?
Well, one that stands out is the assassination of President William McKinley in 1901.
McKinley wasn't that back in the early 1900s.
Yeah, 1901 to be exact.
I was reading that security was pretty lax back then.
Very much so. McKinley actually preferred to be accessible to the public.
He liked to mingle with the people
He did, and unfortunately that made him vulnerable.
and led to his assassination.
It was a tragic event and a real turning point in presidential security.
So before McKinley, there wasn't even a dedicated Secret Service detail.
There was some protection, but it wasn't as formalized or as extensive.
So you could say that McKinley's assassination was a wake-up call?
It led to the creation of the Secret Service's Permanent Presidential Protection Detail.
Wow. So that's how it all started.
In a way, yes, it was a major shift in how we protect the president.
But of course, the threats kept evolving over time.
They did, and security had to keep pace.
And another major turning point, I'm guessing, was the assassination of JFK.
You got it, 1963, a moment that changed the world.
I can't even imagine what that must have been like.
It was a shock to the nation, and it exposed serious security gaps.
So they had to completely rethink presidential protection after that.
They did. The investigation led to a major overhaul of the Secret Service.
So what kind of changes did they make?
Well, for one thing, they started meticulously planning motorcade routes.
No more impromptu stops or detours.
Right, and there was a much greater emphasis on intelligence gathering and threat assessment.
So they were trying to be more proactive rather than reactive.
Exactly. They realized they couldn't just wait for something to happen. They had to anticipate and prevent it.
Makes sense. And were there any other historical events that had a big impact on presidential security?
Well, the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan in 1981 was another wake-up call.
Yeah. Thankfully, he survived that, but it could have been much worse.
It could have, and it highlighted the need for a dedicated medical response team.
So now the president always has a team of doctors and nurses on standby.
Absolutely ready to respond to any medical emergency.
It's amazing how even these tragic events can lead to positive changes.
It's a reminder that we're always learning and adapting.
But it's not just about reacting to the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Secret Service is also looking ahead, trying to anticipate future threats.
So what do you see as the biggest challenges for presidential security today?
Well, we've already talked about drones and how technology is evolving so rapidly.
Yeah, those AI-controlled drones still freak me out a little bit.
I know they're a game changer and a real concern for security experts.
And what about cyber attacks? Are those a big threat to the president?
Absolutely. Think about disrupting communication systems, hacking into vehicles.
Spreading disinformation. It's a whole other dimension of security threats.
It is, and it's something the Secret Service has to constantly monitor and adapt to.
So it's not just about physical security anymore. It's about cybersecurity, too.
Right. Protecting the president from digital threats is just as important as protecting them from physical attacks.
It's a whole other battlefield.
It is, and it's one that's constantly changing.
So the future of presidential security is going to be even more complex.
No doubt about it, and the Secret Service will have to stay ahead of the curve.
It's a lot to think about.
It is, but it's a fascinating world, isn't it?
It really is. I've learned so much from this deep dive.
Me too. It's amazing how much goes into keeping the president safe.
It's a constant reminder that there are people working tirelessly behind the scenes.
Dedicated individuals who put their lives on the line to protect the leader of the free world.
And ultimately to protect our democracy.
That's right. It's a vital part of ensuring the stability and continuity of our nation.
Well said. I think we've covered just about everything.
Yeah, I think we've given our listeners a pretty good overview of presidential security.
From the historical context to the latest technological advancements.
And all the challenges and complexities that come with it.
So next time we see the president on TV,
or in person,
let's take a moment to appreciate all the effort that goes into keeping them safe.
the agents, the technology, the planning, it's a remarkable operation.
It really is, and it's something we often take for granted.
So let's give a shout out to all those dedicated individuals.
The unsung heroes of presidential security.
Keeping the president safe and protecting our nation.
Well said. That's a perfect way to wrap up this deep dive.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this journey.
Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.